There's a quiet kind of person in this world, someone who slips through the digital noise without leaving a trail of selfies behind. Someone who scrolls, watches, listens, observes, but rarely posts their own face. And the strange thing is, most people never stop to ask why. Why does someone choose not to upload their photo when everyone else flashes their expression to millions without hesitation? Why does someone prefer the shadows when the world is obsessed with the spotlight? Most people assume it's fear, or insecurity, or shyness. But the truth is far more layered, far more human, and far more fascinating than anyone realizes. Because the psychology of people who don't post their photos is not a story of absence, it is a story of presence. A story of why someone chooses silence in a world begging for noise. A story of why someone chooses depth in a landscape obsessed with highlights. And if you've ever hesitated before posting your picture, if you've ever stared at a camera and felt a strange discomfort you couldn't name, if you've ever wondered why showing your face to strangers feels heavier than it should, then this story, in a way, is also about you. Let me take you into the mind of the person who doesn't post their image online. Not the cliches, not the assumptions, but the deeper psychological truths that shape someone who chooses invisibility over exposure. It starts with a moment that many people recognize but almost nobody talks about. The moment where you open the camera app, look at your reflection, and feel an unexpected wave of self-awareness. Not insecurity, not discomfort, something more subtle. Something like, this doesn't feel like me. You can't explain it. You don't even need to. You just close the app quietly and continue with your day. Not in sadness, not in fear. Just in a soft, quiet certainty that you don't need to be seen to exist. This is where the psychology begins. See, most people don't realize how much of modern life is shaped by what psychologists call external identity feedback. It's the idea that we evaluate ourselves based on reactions, comments, likes, and digital signals. But people who don't post their photos tend to operate from an entirely different psychological center. They aren't trying to escape attention. They simply don't require it to feel real. For them, identity is something internal, built from thoughts, memories, experiences, reflections, not snapshots. And because their self-worth isn't tied to being perceived, they don't feel an emotional pull toward posting themselves. The world wants faces. They want meaning. The world wants visibility. They want authenticity. The world wants expression. They want understanding. This is the first quiet truth. People who rarely post their photos are often more internally anchored than externally motivated. They create their sense of self from the inside out, not the outside in. And that alone makes them different in a digital landscape that measures life through the lens. But there's something else too, something deeper. People who don't post their photos often see the world in stories rather than images. They pay attention to the atmosphere of moments, the quiet of early mornings, the honesty in conversations, the subtleties in human behavior. When they walk into a room, they don't wonder how the lighting would look in a selfie. They wonder what the mood says. They notice things, they sense things, they absorb things. And because of this, they instinctively pull away from anything that feels performative. Posting a photo doesn't feel wrong to them. It simply feels unnecessary. They don't crave the validation loop because their mind is naturally drawn toward the internal world more than the external display. Some people express themselves by showing their face. Others express themselves by showing their thoughts. These individuals fall into the second category. They communicate through words, through actions, through creative work, through observation, not through curated images. It's not that they can't post, it's that it doesn't feel like their native language. But there is another layer, one that is almost never discussed. People who don't post their photos often have a very unique relationship with vulnerability. Not fear, not avoidance, but discernment. They understand something that most people overlook. Once you post an image of yourself online, it stops being yours. It becomes a public object, open to interpretation, criticism, misunderstanding, misjudgment, and projection. And while some people are comfortable with that, others feel a subtle emotional boundary being crossed. For them, showing their face is not a simple act, it's an intimate one. And intimacy for them is something that must be earned, not distributed. They don't hide, they protect. They choose carefully who gets to see the unfiltered parts of their existence. There is a certain emotional intelligence in that, a kind of self-awareness that understands the difference between openness and exposure. People often mistake privacy for insecurity, but in reality, privacy is a form of emotional strength. It requires discipline to hold something back in a world where everyone is encouraged to reveal everything. Now, here's the part that goes even deeper, the part most people never consider. People who don't post their photos often come from one of three psychological backgrounds. First, they may have grown up in environments where attention felt overwhelming or uncomfortable, not harmful, just too intense. Maybe they were the quiet child in a loud family. Maybe they were the reflective one among extroverts. They learned early on that being seen is not always the same as being understood, and so they developed a preference for softer presence. Second, they may have lived through a phase where they felt overly observed, perhaps at school or in social circles, or during a moment of transition. And because of that, they developed a natural desire to reclaim ownership of their identity. Posting a photo feels like giving away a piece of themselves they'd rather keep. Third, they may be individuals who think deeply, feel deeply, and trust slowly. They don't express themselves casually. They think before they speak. They observe before they act. They reflect before they reveal. To them, privacy is not a wall, it's a garden. It protects the things that matter. But there's another psychological trait that stands out too. People who don't post their photos often have a different relationship with self-perception. While some individuals enjoy capturing their image and sharing it, others feel a sense of distance between how they look and who they are on the inside. Their self-image isn't visual. It's emotional, mental, philosophical. Their sense of self comes from what they think, not how they appear. This creates a fascinating psychological experience. When they look at a photo of themselves, they don't feel seen. They feel represented, and representation feels too shallow for them. They're not afraid of being judged. They're afraid of being reduced to angles, reduced to lighting, reduced to a still frame that cannot possibly carry the depth of who they are. They want to be known for their essence, not their image. But here's the part that resonates with many people quietly, silently, in the privacy of their minds. Some individuals don't post their photos because they are perfectionists of spirit, not appearance. Not perfectionist in a stressful or demanding way, but in a thoughtful one. They want things to mean something. They want their expression to feel authentic. Forced expression feels untrue to them. They don't post casually because their identity is not casual. And if a moment doesn't feel emotionally aligned with them, they simply don't share it. It's not about hiding, it's about honesty. Then there's another truth, one many people whisper, but rarely admit. Some individuals simply feel more comfortable in the role of the observer, not because they lack confidence, but because they see the world with a certain depth that makes them more interested in studying human dynamics than participating in the constant presentation of self. They love watching how people interact, they love learning, they love reflecting, they love understanding the emotional layers behind people's actions, and in that quiet reflection, posting a photo feels like stepping out of their natural habitat. But don't mistake quietness for lack of presence. Some of the most thoughtful souls in the world are the ones who rarely reveal themselves, and some of the most self-aware people are those who don't post anything that feels unnecessary. And here's something that research quietly supports. Individuals who value privacy often have stronger boundaries, clearer emotional awareness, and deeper relationships with themselves. They aren't avoiding the world, they are curating their relationship with it. Now imagine someone like that scrolling through social media. They see people posting their lives, their trips, their celebrations, their faces, their reflections. They're not judgmental. They're not dismissive. They're not cynical. They simply feel something different inside. Something that says, I don't need to prove my life to feel my life. Something that says, I don't need to show my face to feel like myself. Something that says, I don't need to be visible to be real. And this inner voice is what shapes their choices. But here is where the psychology becomes the most interesting. Some people don't post their photos because they understand something profound about human nature. When you stay a little hidden, people relate to you differently. They listen more, they imagine more, they project less, they connect to your words, your presence, your ideas, rather than your appearance. They connect to your essence. For individuals like this, being unseen becomes a quiet form of freedom. A freedom to express without being defined. A freedom to observe without pressure. A freedom to be themselves without performing. And when they do choose to show their face, if they ever do, it is meaningful, intentional, personal, not an obligation, not a habit, a choice. There is also a philosophical side to this. Some people simply don't feel the need to immortalize themselves through images. They live through sensations, memories, reflections, inner experiences. They carry their life inside them, not on a screen. Their moments are not content, they are chapters. Their days are not stories to be broadcast, they are experiences to be lived. For them, life is not a gallery, it is a journey. But the most beautiful truth about people who don't post their photos is this: they are not trying to hide from the world. They are trying to experience it more deeply. And in a strange way, they often understand something that many people forget: that a face is not the whole story, that presence is bigger than visibility, that identity is deeper than appearance, that life is richer than what can be captured in a frame. And whether anyone realizes it or not, the people who live this way often carry a rare kind of depth, a rare kind of introspection, a rare kind of authenticity. They see life from the inside out, not the outside in. And in a world built on images, that alone makes them different. But there is still more to the psychology, much more, because behind their choice lies a quiet emotional landscape that reveals something profound about how they relate to themselves and the world. There is a moment often unnoticed where someone who never posts their photos sits alone with their thoughts and wonders why the world treats visibility as proof of existence. They watch others capturing every angle, every expression, every glimpse of their face, and they feel a quiet question rising within them. Why must I show myself for my life to be real? And the answer they arrive at is simple, gentle, and deeply human: I don't. This is where the psychology deepens, because people who don't post their photos often live with a heightened sense of inner life. They experience themselves from the inside, not the outside. Their self-awareness is not shaped by how they appear, but by how they think, how they feel, how they make sense of the world. And because of that, their relationship with self-image becomes profoundly different from most. For many people, a photograph is a way of saying, "Here I am." But for someone who rarely shows their face, the feeling is different. They don't find their identity in the visible. They find it in the invisible, the thoughts that live behind the eyes, the private emotions that don't require an audience, the internal journey that doesn't benefit from documentation. They don't feel incomplete without public visibility. They feel grounded in their quiet. And there is a kind of wisdom in that, a wisdom the modern world often forgets, because we live in a culture where people are encouraged to create a visual narrative of their life. But those who refrain from doing so often ask a simple but profound question: what is the purpose of this? Not in a cynical way, not in a judgmental way, simply in a reflective one. They wonder whether a moment loses its meaning if it is not displayed, and for them, it does not. In fact, it often gains meaning when kept private. This doesn't make them distant, it makes them sincere. There's something else at play too, something subtle. For people who rarely post their photos, the act of taking a picture of themselves can feel strangely artificial. Not because they dislike their appearance, not because they fear judgment, but because the act itself feels disconnected from how they naturally exist. Their self-perception is not built on visuals, it's built on awareness, character, insight, lived experience. To them, taking a photo feels like translating their identity into a language that doesn't truly capture it, and every translation loses something. A picture might represent them, but it doesn't express them. An expression matters more. Many of these individuals have a trait in common: a quiet sensitivity to being observed, not in a negative way, but in a perceptive one. They are aware, consciously or subconsciously, that being seen changes human behavior. The moment someone knows they are being watched, something shifts, maybe subtly, maybe dramatically, but something changes. And for those who value authenticity, that shift feels uncomfortable. So they choose presence over performance, reality over representation, genuine experience over captured image. There's something else, something almost poetic, about how they navigate the digital world. While others document the surface of life, they document the depth of it. Their thoughts, their reflections, their insights, their observations. These are the things they offer to the world. And whether quietly or openly, they live with an awareness that identity is not built from pixels, but from consciousness. But here's the part that goes deeper. People who don't post their photos often have a strong internal sense of autonomy. They like owning themselves. They like knowing that their identity is not accessible to anyone who scrolls past. They like that only the people who truly know them get to see them. Their real expressions, their real presence, their real light. Their face becomes something sacred, something intimate, something shared deliberately rather than automatically. This doesn't mean they have barriers, it means they have boundaries, healthy ones that modern technology often dissolves, but they choose to preserve. And boundaries are a sign of emotional maturity, not avoidance. Now, let's explore another layer, one that speaks to something universal, but rarely acknowledged. People who don't post their photos often have a very unique relationship with time. A picture freezes a moment, but not everyone wants their moments frozen. Some people want their memories to remain fluid, alive, personal. They want their experiences to breathe and evolve within them, not sit still in a digital archive. Their connection to life is experiential, not visual. They prefer remembering how something felt rather than how something looked. This makes them understand something many people overlook. Not every moment needs to be preserved. Some moments are meant to be lived once, then carried softly in the heart. And for those who hold this perspective, posting a photo often feels like interrupting the flow of experience. It turns living into documenting. It turns feelings into content. And they instinctively resist anything that pulls them away from presence. Now, here's a psychological insight most people don't know. Individuals who rarely post their face often score higher in what researchers call private self-consciousness. That means they are more aware of their inner world, thoughts, reflections, self-evolution, rather than public self-consciousness, which is awareness of how they appear to others. This doesn't mean they are self-critical. It means they are self-aware, and self-aware people tend to choose their expressions intentionally rather than impulsively. They don't feel the emotional urgency to show themselves because the validation mechanism doesn't activate in the same way. Their mind is not trained to seek public reflection. Instead, they live in what psychologists call an internal locus of identity. They define themselves through introspection, through personal values, through inner stability. They don't need mirrors, they don't need cameras, they don't need digital applause. They feel real because they know themselves, not because others see them. But this doesn't mean their lives lack connection. In fact, people who don't post their photos often have deeper connections with the people they trust. They are intentional with who they share themselves with. And intentionality creates intimacy. When they show their face to someone, it means something. And in a world where everything is shared casually, intentionally shared presence becomes almost a gift. There is also another psychological perspective worth mentioning. Some people don't post themselves because they have a unique sense of personal narrative. Their identity is not a timeline of pictures, it is a gradual evolution of understanding. They don't need to catalogue their growth visually, they feel it internally. While some people track their lives through images, others track their lives through emotional and intellectual milestones. This is when I learned something important. This is when I understood myself in a new way. These moments matter to them far more than how they appeared in a photograph, and because of this, the need to post their face feels irrelevant. But the most misunderstood aspect of their psychology is this: many of them do not avoid the camera. They simply avoid the pressure that comes with being witnessed. They do not fear visibility. They fear distortion. They know that once a picture is posted, people interpret it through their own filters, perceptions, biases, projections, and these interpretations rarely reflect the truth. So they quietly choose accuracy over exposure. They choose the integrity of their inner life over the uncertainty of public perception. There's another part too, something quiet but powerful. People who don't post their photos often feel a deeper connection to anonymity, not because they want to disappear, but because anonymity allows them to be fully themselves without distraction, without assumptions, without expectations, without the unconscious influence of being observed. Anonymity becomes a form of psychological freedom, and for people with rich inner worlds, freedom is more valuable than visibility. But let's go even deeper, to a truth people rarely explore. Some individuals don't post their photos because they are highly empathetic. They feel things deeply. They absorb emotions from others. And because of that, they are sensitive to the emotional risks of exposure. They don't want to open themselves to judgment they never asked for. They don't want their face to trigger assumptions or misunderstandings. They don't want to carry emotional weights that don't belong to them. So they quietly choose peace over performance. And peace for them is the ability to exist without needing to be seen. But perhaps the most poetic part of their psychology is this. People who don't post their photos often have an old soul way of experiencing life. They treat their presence as something private. Their face is not a symbol. It is not a brand. It is not a statement. It is simply a part of their humanity, not a tool. Somewhere deep inside, they feel that the world doesn't need their face to know their heart. They feel that their presence can be known through their words, their thoughts, their character, their actions, their energy. They trust that their essence speaks louder than any picture ever could. And they're right, because presence is not something you show. It is something you carry. But let's look at one more element, one that reveals something profound. People who don't post their photos often have a refined sense of privacy that comes from understanding the difference between two things, being open and being exposed. These individuals can be incredibly open with their emotions, their insights, their reflections. But they are careful about exposure, because exposure allows others to define them without truly knowing them. And they guard themselves from that not out of fear, but out of self-respect. They don't want to be misinterpreted. They don't want to be reduced. They don't want to be understood through fragments. They want to be known in full by people who take the time to understand. Some might call them mysterious, but mystery is just another name for depth in a world moving too fast to notice. But here's something important. People who don't post their photos are not against visibility. They're against unnecessary visibility. They're not hiding. They're choosing. They're not avoiding the world. They're navigating it with intention. They understand that the most meaningful things in life often stay unphotographed. The laughter shared in private conversations, the quiet moments of reflection, the personal growth that happens when nobody is watching, the realizations that change you even though no one else can see them. These moments are the ones they value most. And because they value them, they protect them. Now picture this individual again, scrolling, reading, observing. They see others posting, sharing, celebrating, expressing. They feel no envy, no comparison, no pressure, just a peaceful awareness that their path is different and that there is strength in difference. They know that visibility does not equal value. They know that attention does not equal worth. They know that being seen does not make you real, and not being seen does not make you invisible. Their identity lives somewhere deeper, somewhere even the highest resolution camera cannot capture. And maybe that's why people find something quietly magnetic about them, because there is a depth you can sense even when you cannot see them, a presence that doesn't require presentation, a voice that doesn't require a face, a soul that doesn't require framing. The world often misunderstands them, but they rarely misunderstand themselves. And that, in the end, is the remarkable psychology behind the people who don't post their photos. They aren't resisting the world. They are resisting the pressure to become something they are not. They aren't seeking invisibility. They are protecting authenticity. They aren't afraid to be seen. They are unwilling to be simplified. They understand that some parts of the human experience are more beautiful when kept close, that some truths are more sacred when not displayed, that the self is richest when it belongs first to the person living inside it. And they know something else, something almost everyone eventually realizes. The most meaningful kind of presence cannot be captured. It can only be felt. and for them that is enough.